and the omnibus. So I was forced into the Archers when I was a child. And look, it's come back to bite me later on.
We'll wash with the stuff.
The Archers is the world's longest-running radio show, with more than 15,000 episodes broadcast. Despite being a rural flavour show, The Archers is recorded in the heart of...
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're jumping into something a little different today, looking at an excerpt from an audio drama.
Right.
But don't let that fool you. It gives us this incredibly focused look at a specific series of moments, conversations unfolding. Mm-hmm. So our goal is to unpack this slice, pull out the crucial details, the surprising facts, and really see what underlying currents are shaping things within this world.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting way to do it.
It really is. And this segment, it's packed with unexpected turns. We've got strange health scares, environmental data coming to light, and some incredibly bold, sudden decisions. So let's get into the details from the source.
And you're right, it's often in these seemingly small moments, these sort of slice-of-life scenes, like a chat on a hillside or an incident during a therapy session, that the biggest insights are actually hiding.
Exactly.
They can really illuminate much larger themes or, complex dynamics that are usually just bubbling beneath the surface.
Couldn't agree more. So the source kicks off with a moment that, it immediately grabs your attention. We find Father Crispin, the vicar, getting a massage from Kate.
Yeah.
That's not exactly your everyday picture of a vicar, is it?
It certainly adds an unexpected layer.
Huh.
And the reason he gives for being there is he strained his shoulder.
Strained it doing what? Not like carrying heavy church things, but lifting a kettlebell. Mm-hmm. He's apparently quite focused on physical fitness.
Mm-hmm. Very focused. And that's really underlined later in the source material when he actually arrives at Kate's place, having run 26 miles, all the way from Borchester.
Wow.
And he was looking for an outdoor shower. I mean, that shows some serious commitment to fitness.
It really does. Although, Jakob has that classic dry take on it. He calls it performative athleticism.
Small chuckle sound implied by tone.
Right. And he was wishing the vicar had at least had the good grace to look, out of breath after running a marathon.
Sounds about right for Jakob. But then the situation takes this very sharp, quite alarming turn during the massage itself. Suddenly, Father Crispin just becomes unresponsive.
Yeah, that must have been terrifying. And Kate's immediate reaction is just panic. She thinks she's actually killed him.
It's a horrible moment for her, understandably.
And then Jakob arrives, and you get this really strange scene where a vet is suddenly faced with what looks like a human medical emergency.
Yeah, a real sense of role reversal and, helplessness there.
Luckily, Phoebe shows up just in time, and she's able to talk to the paramedics when they arrive. So what did they think was going on?
Well, they offered a suspected diagnosis. They called it something like a syncope.
A syncope? Okay, which the source clarifies is basically just, a faint.
Exactly, a simple faint. But despite that seemingly straightforward diagnosis, they still decided to take him to the hospital anyway.
Oh, why is that?
They mentioned being concerned about potential underlying causes, so even the professionals weren't entirely sure, it seems.
Okay, so there's still some uncertainty. And for the community, the immediate worry is, will Father Crispin be okay to officiate Peggy Woolley's funeral?
Right, that's a huge event looming.
And this sudden collapse puts it all in real jeopardy. Kate's quote really sums up the shock, doesn't it? She says she's used to people falling asleep on the massage table, but definitely not that.
No, it went from just a routine appointment to a moment of genuine crisis in, seconds. Really highlights how quickly the unexpected can just disrupt everything.
Okay, let's pivot now pretty significantly because the source does as well. We move from that medical scare to something more environmental by the findings of an ecological survey of the Burrow Estate. Mm-hmm. And this whole discussion happens between Justin Elliott and Stella up on Lakey Hill.
Right, being up on the hill gives them that perfect vantage point, doesn't it? Both literally looking out over the land and figuratively getting that high-level overview of its, ecological health.
So what did the survey find? Let's start with the good news. Were there any positives in this report?
It wasn't all bad. The wildflower margins on the arable field seemed to be a real success story.
That was Adam Macy's suggestion originally, wasn't it? I remember there was some grumbling about losing productive land.
That's the one. And yeah, despite maybe some initial pushback, the report really backs him up here.
How so?
Well, the evidence showed good numbers of pollinators and seeds. They noted bees were active, not just in the margins, but spilling over into the hedges too.
Okay.
And decent bird life was present. Things like yellowhammers, bullfinches, nesting skylarks. You can actually hear a skylark in the background during their conversation in the source audio.
Oh, that's a nice touch. Reinforces the point,
Exactly.
so that's a good sign. Anything else on the positive side?
Yes, the soil quality was classed as good, but specifically on the herbal ways.
Which was another of Adam's ideas, right? That Justin says Borchester land has expanded over the last 3 years.
That's right. So, yeah, some green shoots, you could say, literally.
But, I sense a but coming. Stella quickly points out these positives are, quote, rather outweighed by the debits. So, what's the bad news?
Well, yeah, the report is described as sobering reading, and it gets pretty stark when they look at insect life.
Oh, dear.
The numbers of butterflies and moths are low, like in the tens, not the hundreds you might hope for.
Yeah.
And there's a serious reported loss of grasshoppers, hoverflies, crickets, and beetles. Just not there in the numbers they should be.
And insects are so fundamental, aren't they? The base of so many food chains. That must have a ripple effect.
Precisely. And the report shows a clear knock-on effect on the birds that feed on those insects.
Okay.
There are poor numbers of many specific insect-eating birds like whitethroat, chiffchaff, willow warblers, blackcaps, various tits. They only spotted a couple of missile thrushes in the whole survey.
Wow, that's not good. What about water? Streams, ditches on the estate?
Also not great, I'm afraid. They're described as being in a poor state. High nitrates and phosphates, high turbidity, which means cloudiness, algal blooms, and just a dearth, as they put it, of aquatic plants. And that ties directly into low numbers of things like mayflies and caddisflies, which need clean water.
And the soils, apart from those good herbal lays.
It's a mixed picture there.
Yeah.
The herbal lays and the no-till practices they've introduced are offering some help, definitely. But the standard grade 3B and 4 agricultural land, it's rated as poor.
Poor how?
Low carbon content, low numbers of earthworms and beetles, the things you need for healthy soil structure.
So putting it all together, it sounds like the estate, despite some targeted efforts, is really struggling ecologically overall.
Not great, is how Stella puts it. She compares it to a bad school report.
Yeah.
Justin agrees it's sobering reading, though he does add it's not far off what I'd expected, kind of acknowledging the pressures of food production targets.
Right.
But he makes it clear he's not there to apportion blame, just to confront the reality of the situation.
And confronting that reality seems to really trigger something significant in Justin's perspective. He reacts quite strongly to this report.
He does. He immediately praises the study, assures Stella it won't just sit on a shelf. He sees it as something demanding action.
And he links this report to his more recent experiences, doesn't he? Specifically working with the rewilding team in Ambridge.
Yes, he says it's opened his eyes, pushed him to widen my horizons, and question everything philosophy, mission, objectives means regarding Borchester Land's whole approach.
So it's making him rethink fundamentals.
Big time. He even mentions, sort of in passing, a watershed moment he experienced at the back end of last year. Doesn't go into detail, but suggests this thinking isn't entirely new, but the report is maybe crystallizing it.
And crucially, he connects all of this to thinking about his own legacy, especially with Peggy's recent death making him reflect. He's asking himself these big questions. What will Justin Elliott be remembered for? How will Ambridge judge him? He's really wrestling with whether he'll be seen as someone who, quote, made his fortune trashing nature, plundering the land.
It's a really powerful personal moment you hear in the source. Stella tries to soften it a bit, reminding him he's been feeding the nation all these years.
Sure, the practical side.
But it's clear he's genuinely grappling with the environmental cost of his business success. He seems quite troubled by it.
And then, almost immediately after this heavy reflection, he shares this story that seems to provide the spark, the final push, for a truly bold decision.
Yeah, it's quite a pivot.
Yeah.
He tells Stella about his friend Winston, spelled with a Y. He notes from molding.
Okay.
This Winston's family was in aggregates, quarrying.
Right, digging stuff up.
Exactly. They had this sand quarry down in Sussex, a productive commercial site. But eventually, like all quarries, the extraction stopped.
And instead of just leaving it as this, big hole in the ground, this scar on the landscape.
Winston transformed it, turned it into a nature reserve. Justin says it was part of the planning process, maybe, but he emphasizes how incredibly inspirational the outcome is. He describes visiting it and seeing it just teeming with nature and new life He calls it quite magical.
Wow.
And that story hitting him right after seeing the sobering report and worrying about his own legacy, it clearly just clicks something into place for him. He says, quite simply, that's what I want to do.
Give back, make recompense. And the decision that follows from that realization is, well, it's almost stunning in its directness and its scale.
It really is. He just turns to Stella and says, I'm going to take Bee's land out of food production and rewild the Burrow Estate.
Wow. Just like that. That is a massive, sudden declaration. Stella's reaction must have been immediate shock.
Oh yeah, complete disbelief. Her first response is apparently, you don't mean all of it, surely.
And her core objection comes straight away, doesn't it? Very practical.
Immediate and practical. Food security. She points out it's a huge issue right now, has been critical since World War II, and tells him flat out, you can't stop producing food.
But Justin seems resolute.
Remarkably firm. His response is basically, I think you'll find I can. He's confident he can persuade the board, or if he has to, use Lamar's majority shareholding to force it through.
So he's prepared for a fight. He acknowledges there will be very unhappy people, but seems willing to take that risk.
Yeah, he even sort of muses aloud that maybe he's spent too much time worrying about pleasing small groups of people in suits and not enough about the bigger picture, the land itself.
And he circles back to his motivation again.
He does. He reiterates that this rewilding project, this will be his legacy, his way of restoring nature, leaving Ambridge in a better state.
Stella, though, she's still stuck on the immediate fallout, isn't she? Particularly for Home Farm.
Right, because they're the main arable contractor for Borchester land on the estate. She points out they'd lose a massive chunk of income.
And Justin's response to that is, well, quite cold, actually.
It's pretty blunt. That's business. Contracts come, contracts go. He says Borchester land will meet their legal obligations, of course, but Home Farm's financial situation is, this is a direct quote, not really my concern in the context of this bigger rewilding vision.
Ouch. That's harsh. He does ask Stella to keep the plan quiet for the time being, though.
Yeah, which definitely suggests he knows just how big the potential backlash could be once this gets out.
So it's a decision born from this deep personal conviction, this reflection on legacy, inspired by a story, but one that immediately slams headlong into significant practical and economic realities for other people.
Absolutely. It sets up a major conflict right away.
So looking back at this whole segment from the audio drama, it's quite right. We've seen this sudden, unexpected physical incident with the vicar, throwing things into uncertainty. Then we get this detailed and frankly rather damning ecological report showing the state of the land.
Yes, sobering is the word.
And out of that, combined with personal reflection, comes this massive, bold decision from Justin Elliott to just rewild a huge portion of the estate. How do these seemingly separate things connect, and what does it all tell us?
Well, I think it shows how sometimes these external shocks, events completely outside our control like the vicar's faint, can suddenly highlight vulnerabilities and dependencies within a community, like who officiates the funeral.
Right.
And at the same time, hard data, objective information like that ecological report can force a really difficult confrontation with uncomfortable truths, the real impact of our actions on the environment.
Okay.
And it seems to be in that space where that data meets deep personal reflection on purpose, on legacy, and then gets sparked by a compelling example of transformation like the Winston story. That's where really radical decisions can suddenly be made.
It really emphasizes how these different threads, the personal crisis, the scientific evidence, the inspirational anecdote, can suddenly intersect and drive actions that have absolutely huge consequences.
And immediately, those consequences create tension, don't they?
Yeah.
You've got Justin's ambition for environmental restoration and shaping his legacy clashing head-on with very immediate practical concerns.
Yeah, like food security on a national level, which Stella raises.
And the direct economic impact on local businesses and livelihoods, like Home Farm potentially losing a massive contract.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive, pulling apart this PAC segment. We've explored that surprising health scare with Father Crispin, putting a question mark over a key community event. We've delved into the sobering findings of the ecological survey, revealing that significant environmental degradation on the Burrow Estate.
A tough reality check there.
And we witnessed Justin Elliott's sudden, incredibly bold decision to rewild a vast amount of land, a decision clearly driven by this desire to restore nature, shape his legacy, but one that instantly raises these huge, challenging questions.
It truly brings into sharp focus that fundamental tension, doesn't it? The ambition for large-scale environmental good, maybe even personal redemption, versus the immediate, complex realities of food production, economic stability, and the impact on others who depend on the way things are now.
And it leaves us, and you, the listener, with something pretty significant to think about, doesn't it? I mean, given the kind of sobering environmental findings we heard about in this report, findings that, let's be honest, are echoed in the real world all the time.
And absolutely.
What level of disruption is actually acceptable or maybe even necessary to pursue ecological recovery on this kind of scale? And perhaps even more critically, who should ultimately bear the immediate economic and social costs when these radical, potentially world-changing decisions are made?
So what are you doing now?
Just getting ready for the next episode. Just moving mics around again.
So what do you do?
I'll do the spot effects on the arches.
Are you what we call Foley then?
Kind of. Yep.
Okay. And these are all part of the paraphernalia of production?
Yep, that's the ball bar.
This one?
Yep, that's...
Babies so wanted to be in their own place when their baby came. It's due in 2 months. Not much chance of that now. But, I mean, it would have been a stretch for him going actually mind, but I just wish there was something practical I could do to help him get on.
I think The Archers has had this immense popularity over the years, basically because it has always very accurately reflected the reality of life and living in a rural community at whatever